Hello there. Today I'm speaking to you from the Petra Winery in Tuscany, more specifically in what they refer to as the Costa Toscana. So coastal Tuscany, south of Bulgaria, with a beautiful view from the outside when it's not raining like it is today, of the island of Elba off the coast. So a fantastic setting, and with, as you can see, an amazing architect designed barrel hall as well. So the wine I'm taking a look at here is their Hebo 2024, and this is their entry-level wine. The winery here was established in 1997 by Vittorio Moretti, and Vittorio evidently made his fortune in construction, and therefore I think when he came to build the winery between 2001 and 2003, it was very important to him that it both had an architectural effect and was also highly functional in its design. The property that was originally purchased was an old farm, and there were some vines here, but in general most of those were ripped out, and replanting went on throughout most of the first 6 years of the estate. And in honesty, the team that were doing this was starting from a pretty much blank slate. So they did plant varieties such as Syrah, which they've now pulled out, but in general the winery focused on Bordeaux varieties, Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Cabernet Franc, and also on Sangiovese. And more recently they have been refocusing on that, and there's now a range of 3 wines for which the Hebo is the entry-level wine. Majority of production, somewhere in the region of about 220,000 bottles of Hebo are made a year. The wines here are sold under the IGT Toscana, although as I say the winery focuses on the idea that these are wines from the Costa Toscana. The blend for this wine is 55% of Merlot with 20% of Cabernet Sauvignon, 15% of Sangiovese and 10% of Cabernet Franc. The soils here are largely clay, including limestone, and the clay is largely composed of the underlying rock, which is something called fleche, a mudstone. So these are soils in terms of the clays and the limestones with good water retaining capacity, but also the stone content helps drainage. Up until 2022, the vineyards here were managed organically and certified as such. However, that's not anything that was ever put on the label. Since then, they've actually decided that it's better for the environment not to use quite as much copper sulphate in terms of treatments, and so they've pulled back, but they now believe their approach is much more sustainable. The fruit for this wine is predominantly machine harvested, although some of it will have been hand-picked. The winery is designed so that everything moves through gravity. So grape reception is at the top of the winery, and from there everything moves down to the tanks and then moves out into the 2 arms of the winery where those wines that age in barrel are matured. Hebo is not a wine that ages in barrel. It ferments in stainless steel tanks with a maximum temperature of fermentation going up to about 26 or 27 degrees, so as to avoid over-extraction and to allow the wines to express their perfume. The wine undergoes malolactic conversion in tank, ages briefly in stainless steel tanks, but actually is put into concrete tanks for a couple of months just to finish off, to help the wine round out and marry before it's bottled. So let's take a look at the wine, shall we? First thing I'd say is it's got some really quite good colour. It's a purple ruby note to it. It's not opaque. The wine has 13% alcohol, and as I'm swirling it there, just about forming tears on the side of the glass there. So let's see what we make of the aromas, shall we? The aromas really do have a beautiful lifted perfume. There's a real delicate, high-toned elegance to this. There's a red fruit, mulberry, but then behind that there are some delicate notes of perhaps a little touch of bergamot and also notes of blood orange. These are delicate balsamic notes that are actually quite typical of wines from this winery and some others in this region. So let's have a taste. On the palate, the wine is relatively light to medium body, very fresh, it's mouth-watering. There are very fine tannins, quite delicate, and along with those you've got sort of delicate red fruits, hints perhaps of raspberry, I mentioned mulberries earlier, and perhaps a delicate red cherry note as well. And the thing is, the fruit is fresh and juicy, and it's being supported very nicely by its acidity. The alcohol, as I say, is at 13%, and that's not intruding on the fruit, on the finish. It's allowing the wine to have a long, elegant finish. The wine is relatively simple and straightforward. It has a really beautiful, fine tannic structure. I think its fresh acidity will allow it to pair with food really nicely, and I'm really quite impressed with the length of flavour that's here. Now, I took a look at the Wine Searcher aggregated critic score for this wine, and as of yet, the 2024, which is the current vintage, doesn't actually have a critic score itself. However, the vintages of Hebo that I've seen have scored between 89 and 90. And personally, I think this particular vintage, because of its beautiful aromatics and its lovely tannic structure, is probably worth 90 out of 100. It's not a particularly expensive wine. I will leave a link in the notes below to the Wine Searcher webpage for this vintage of this wine, so you can see where it's available in your market and for what price. And I suspect you'll probably think it's something of a bargain. So thank you so much for watching this tasting. I do hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, do please press the like button. That would be fantastic. If you're watching these videos and you enjoy them, do please consider signing up and subscribing. That will all help me develop the channel further. Also, if you have any friends you think might like to watch the video, please feel free to pass it on to them. That would be fantastic. I'd really appreciate your support in that way. And if you have any questions or comments, do please pop them in the comments box below. I'd be really interested to hear what you think about the wines I'm looking at, the tastings I'm doing, or anything else that relates to that. So thank you once again for watching, and I do hope that maybe you'll be able to make some time, sometime in the near future, come and join me for another tasting. Until then, bye for now.